Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to come out of executive session. Let the record show that no votes were taken to seal the minutes.
Second.
That's the motion. We have a second?
Second motion.
Roll call.
Mrs.
All right, hold on.
Yes.
If anybody has any uncontrollable urges to blurt out tonight, can you just try to, if you do have that urge, just go into the other room right now. We're going to try to keep this orderly, okay? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bottomoli?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Swansky?
Yes.
Mr. Biragad?
Yes. Madam Clerk, will you lead us in the prayer and the pledge, please?
What is the Holy Spirit of for all those who are serving in positions of authority and responsibility?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So nobody signed up for the open forum, so is there anybody that would like to, anybody in the audience that is here that would like to speak at open forum? It's not for the solar project. This is separate from the solar project. Okay? Nobody wants to talk at open forum. I just can't believe so many people are here tonight to discuss the Knights of Columbus request for an outdoor permit. But anyway, moving on. Ordinance amendment. Section 5.7, ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations. This is a continuation of the public hearing. Now, I know we have a list here of people that requested to speak. This is a continuation of the hearing that we already had. So if you already spoke, unless you have new things to add to what you already said, I ask that you don't come up again. This isn't just to reiterate what was already said. This is if you want to add anything, or if there's somebody here that hasn't spoken. Okay, it's just a continuation. Also, if you haven't spoken, last time we were all here, I gave a lot of leeway and I allowed people to come up after we had, after everybody spoke. Somebody found a loophole in that, in my doing it that way and took advantage of it. So unless you're on the sheet, you will not be able to speak at the public hearing. So if you have anything to say, please come up and sign the sheet. Okay? I will give everybody plenty of time to speak. You don't have to give your minutes away. You don't have to sign up the sheet to give your minutes away. I'm not going to be petty like that. When it's over, though, well, I'm going to close the public hearing. When I close the public hearing will be closed. We will deliberate publicly, and we will either decide to vote or not vote. So that's what we're going to do. So before I open the hearing, I'm going to begin with representatives from Green Development. If you want to come up, if you had anything to add, in addition to what we already spoke about last week. We're not reiterating what we already talked about.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. John Mancini on behalf of the applicant Green Development. Clearly, you've heard a lot of information. You've also received some additional information. What I think is noteworthy and different from the last hearing is the fact that on May 3rd, the applicant did have an opportunity to go back to the planning board, have the planning board take a look at the ordinance, and also take into consideration some additional comment, or comment I should say, that was heard by this board at a previous meeting. At that meeting, the planning board also took its charge per state statute, and that is it reviewed the ordinance to determine whether the same was consistent with the town's comprehensive plan, and also whether or not the same was consistent with Rhode Island General Laws 45, 24, 30. I haven't seen its decision, but I'm sure it's part of your package. And I know that the planner did also do a report and presented that to you as well. So I think that answers some of the questions that maybe the council members had at the last hearing in regards to that. We'll be available if the board has any additional questions, if the public has any questions. Again, what's important to note is that this isn't the process for the approval itself. This is simply the process to be approved. And what we've done is not a zone change or a change to the comprehensive plan or to the future land use map. What we're suggesting is an overlay district, which is an addendum or an extension and amendment to your existing section 5.7. The town already has an extensive provision and an extensive governing process We've added to it, we've subtracted to it, and we've provided the reasons for it. We've also gone through the process of filing it with the town, going to the planning board. We've been to the planning board 3 times, and this is our second time before here. So we're prepared to answer and respond to any questions or concerns you have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kravitz, you want to?
Thank you. I wanted to update both the council and the audience. Last time the council met on April 23rd, taking some notes down, and I made some changes to the ordinance from that night. As John Mancini said, this went to the planning board on May 3rd. I was able to show those changes and amendments, which I'll read to you in a second, they're brief. Showed those to the planning board. They approved of those changes, and they had a couple more changes themselves to make prior to this evening. So I think it was a good exercise to go to the planning board to get that completed. Real quickly, I'll go through some of the changes in the ordinance that will hopefully alleviate some of the concerns that I heard. There was one particular written amendment submitted by attorney Rick Nadeau at the time. The planning board took some of that into account, where they've added a section under definitions, number 1, any utility scale ground-mounted solar system for the purpose of selling energy in energy credits to an electric utility company, a municipality, or any other third-party consumer of energy. So they've added this notion of a third party being able to purchase energy credits. That could be advantageous for certain types of solar projects that can offer residents packages where they could pay lower utility costs from the solar array itself. In that regard, such a project like that would have a direct local benefit to the residents, so we thought that was a good idea. There was concern about the overlay district and whether or not it could expand, so we added the following language. Within the overlay district here is proposed, it says, expansion of the overlay district, whether by administrative, minor, or major subdivision, shall be considered an amendment to the town zoning code subject to review by the town council and planning board in accordance with Rhode Island General Law 45-2451, which is this very process. So the only way you could add property to this area is through those 3 types of subdivisions. And if someone wants to do so, we'd have to go through this whole process again. So the planning board liked that provision. They asked that the location criteria, they limit the overlay to the following areas. This is key because these 3 sections that are in here, they kept the conjunction and, which means you've got to obviously meet all the criteria. So there was a proposition to change it to or, which of course would have kind of defeated the purpose of the overlay and would have made it town-wide potentially. There was a new section we've added, that's number 4, and it reads as follows. If any portion of a lot overlaps into the overlay zone, said lot in its entirety shall be considered part of the overlay zone. So that, of course, takes care of properties that are on the fence, say. If a portion of the property is in, then the whole property is part of the zone. That, incidentally, was always the case with this from the day we kind of received the proposal. The next piece goes down to incentives. When we're speaking about tax revenue, in doing so, we're asking that the proposed development shall provide the town with an incentive proposal above the minimum rates established by Rhode Island General Law 44-5-3. That's the statute that mandates that municipalities must receive a minimum of $5 per kilowatt hour. So we're saying, yes, we'd like that. In addition, we're going to try to obtain, like the applicant has proposed already, above that amount in various forms. Because the next section, when the lease request ultimately, let's say it goes to the council will decide on the tax agreement, such as the pilot or any other impact fees and or development incentives. They were throwing around ideas of having anything from scholarships to different ways. You know, Ocean State Power does that involve Porterville, they have scholarship fund. There can be different things where in which the community can derive the benefits, and we've tried to capture all of those potentials. And then the last thing we've got is on decommissioning. I know that was a concern. about decommissioning. Of course, we want to have surety in place to ensure that, you know, we're protected, landowners are protected. So we've got a section that reads, decommissioning shall require approval by the town council as part of the preliminary plan application of the planning board. Surety shall be in the form of either a combination of bond, cash, and/or property liens to ensure adequate financial protection exists to support dismantling of abandoned systems. The notion of liening property, we feel is appropriate in this instance because the property can be leased. So that's a way for the town to have control, which I would think the property owner would appreciate, that they're protected too, because they're still going to be the fee simple owner of the property. They're just leasing it. So I think it's in the property owner's best interest to be protected there too. The only other thing I want to briefly kind of say here, there was a lot of discussion from the 23rd about if projects that fit this criteria don't have to go before the zoning board. There was concern that the town might not have an adequate level of review to ensure protection of various things. We talked about the environment, the land, erosion, streams, watersheds, wildlife and fauna, etc. So I just wanted to tell the people here, inform you that our existing ordinance is quite lengthy, and I think this is the key difference between our ordinance and that of Exeter. I've been hearing a lot of discussion on. We've got pages of detailed information that the planning board, and at the time the zoning board, could request of an applicant. Of course, the request here is to amend the overlay such that it doesn't have to go before the zoning board. The planning board can still and will ask for all these items. And the lion's share of those are in the existing ordinance, which you can see on the town's website. It's 575, it really begins in that section. And that's where all of the information the planning board can ask for above and beyond the 8 standards that the zoning board could ask for. And there's a lot of information there. Noise generation, of course, the setbacks that we have, wildlife and fauna access, migratory patterns must remain unaffected. Feeding, nesting, breeding, transit patterns of wildlife. There's going to be a lot of detailed scoping going on with DEM if and when a project comes forward to the planning board. Visual buffer setbacks, fencing, signs, utility connections, appurtenant structures. Goes on and on. Environmental sensitivity. There's another section here which I thought was interesting. Any grading or site preparations must, to the extent possible, conform to the natural topography of the area. Excavation of material, including gravel, sand, and rock, is prohibited unless necessary to properly locate the system. Any excavation shall only be that which is minimally necessary. So obviously, they could ask to blast, but the planning board has the right to say, okay, you can blast, but based on the topography we're seeing, they can control where that happens. So there's a lot of detail, a lot of responsibility is going to fall on the planning board's shoulders. We have a good board, and they're going to do a good job, and I think there's an awful lot of stuff in here that I just think that as you get project specific, okay, we're talking the policy right now, but as you think specifics to the project, the planning board can and will ask for everything related to drainage analysis, even down to the sub-watershed basis. This is a large area, so we're going to make sure that it's seeded right away, and that the storm water erosion controls are maintained. That's the most important aspect of something like this. And of course, to the extent they want to try to work with the existing topography. There's going to be some, I got the feeling there's going to be some push and pull here with the planning board, because I know what the land is like. But I'm asking you to have some trust in the planning board here. So, any other questions? I'll leave it at that with the audience, unless the council has questions now too.
I'm going to reserve my questions for when we deliver it.
Okay.
Mr. President, the previous planning board meeting, as well as in the previous council meeting, I pretty adamant I wanted to see the balanced site. So no falling of materials, if it can remain balanced, whatever materials will stay on the site as much as possible.
That specific question was asked a couple times now through the planning board meetings. There's no doubt there's no material leaving the site, but we're also going to be really, like I said, we're going to be examining the extent of the grading and blasting that's even needed, you know. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Does anybody have else on the council with any questions, Mr. Chairman?
I'll now entertain a motion to continue the public hearing.
So moved, Mr. President.
May I just make a suggestion?
Yes.
If the council, just so the matter that's being discussed by the public is complete, I would ask the council to adopt those amendments.
I'm sorry.
So the
You're
amended
right.
ordinance is in front of you.
Okay.
It's the amendments that have been proposed and just been described by Mr. Kravitz with all your packet. The amended ordinance is in front of you.
All right, so I'm going to
You may
entertain.
have other amendments later.
Right.
That package has been completed for tonight.
All right, I'm going to entertain a motion to adopt the amendments that Mr. Kravitz discussed. This is not it's not a motion to pass these overlay. This is just amendments to the ordinance. We have a second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Bottomoli?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Biragad.
Yes. Okay, now I will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing from 2 weeks ago.
I make a motion to continue the previous meeting.
Second, Mr. President.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bottomoli?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Biragad.
Yes. Okay, before I have the first person come up, I just want to quickly restate what Mr. Kravitz already said, but we are not voting tonight on the project, okay? This is only a vote for the overlay district. If this vote passes, if it passes, then it allows green development to go before, file an application, to go before the planning board with their project. At that time, they will have to present their project. All the details of the project will be examined by the planning board. If it passes the planning board, it will then come back before the council. Okay, so there's many hoops still to jump through, even if this passes this evening. Okay, so I'm going to ask the first person to come up. Ann Clary.
Mr. President and members of the Town Council, my name is Ann Cleary. I've been a lifelong North Smithfield resident, and I'm here to give some input as to my personal feelings on the proposed project. They're going to be very simple, they're not going to be very technical, because I'm not very technical. But I feel that the deforestation of multiple trees involved with this project is immoral. Trees produce oxygen, they provide wildlife habitat, they provide homes for birds, and I'm not a tree hugger either, but you might know my dad, Jim O'Donnell, and he was a tree hugger, and I'm sure he's happy I'm here right now. So I'm going to read a little poem that's not mine, but I think it states it very well. I learned this in elementary school, I don't know if you guys did. It's a poem by Joyce Kilmer. I think that I shall never see a poem as lowly as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowering breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with the rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. And I also believe that there's certainly a lot of financial incentives in the solar project, but I want to admit to everybody here that I watched Roseanne. I don't know if any of you saw the episode last week when a young grandchild was trying to make a birdhouse. And his grandfather was helping him make a birdhouse, and they went through a lot of machinations, but the child said, "Grandpa, what are we making a birdhouse for?" He said, "Well, that's for birds to live in." And the boy said, "Well, we're cutting down trees to make a birdhouse. Didn't they live quite well in the trees without this birdhouse?" And I think it's a very poignant story. There's a lot of trees involved. There's a lot of energy involved. And I think that the opportunity for us to buy solar energy at lower rates, for the town to have a huge financial incentive, is something that you can't ignore. But I think when you sit down and discuss, as you will for many times,